Hey folks, Ray at DCRainmaker.com here to give you your full review of the new Garmin Edge 830. This is not the only product Garmin announced today. They also announced the Edge 530 as well as some dual ANT+ and Bluetooth smart speed and cadence sensors with some kind of unique party tricks. You'll find all the videos and reviews and stuff on those on the screen up there, down there, just everywhere. There's so much stuff dropping today, it's kind of crazy. For this particular review, first off, it's not sponsored in any way, shape, or form. This is just a media loaner unit like most of the media outlets. It goes back here very, very shortly, and I'll go out and buy my own. And second, I'm going to mix things up a little bit where I'm going to go ahead and do kind of an 18 new things on the Edge 830. If you want my full in-depth review on things like accuracy and all that jazz, hit up the link down below in the description there. Tons more that I could ever possibly talk about in this one video. So with that, number one on the list is the new trending load functions. Now we saw some of this coming on the Edge 1030, and then we've seen a little more on the Mark series watches, and now we're really seeing it kind of open up and see how it all looks on the Edge 530 and 830. And what that does is it shows you trending load over the last 7 days as well as over the past 4 weeks, and it divides up those loads in different categories depending on the type of load that you're applying. What's interesting here is this will also show load from Garmin's running watches as well. So if you have something like a Forerunner watch or the Mark series watches, that will pull in that trending load onto this device as well. You'll see that trending load displayed as soon as you complete a ride, as well as things like recovery time, and then some of that trending load is also accessible via the My Stats menu after the fact. Oh, by the way, this is a good time to mention, if you're finding this video interesting or useful, definitely whack that like button at the bottom there. It only takes a split second and really helps out the channel quite a bit. Next, one of the first differences between this and the Edge 530 is the touchscreen. The Edge 530 does not have a touchscreen, whereas the Edge 830 does. Now, if you remember from the Edge 820 days, you're probably like, oh, that's probably a good thing for the 530. And things are definitely improved on the 830. I remember the 520 touchscreen had a lot of challenges with it. And of course, it's a bit funny because if you had a good Edge 820, you were good. But if you didn't, life was miserable. And what became clear over time was it had more to do with manufacturing in any given single unit than it was like the entire line. So some people were no problems at all, some people sucked, and it really had to do with how they layered the different layers of the screen on there. And eventually Garmin got better at that over time. But the good news on the 830, so far so good, but I'm like a sample of one and maybe one other person that I know as well that's had no touchscreen problems. So that's just something to keep in mind. Helicopter, really? Next, on the Edge 830, there's dramatically faster processing. The processor is 2 times faster than the Edge 820 processor, at least according to Garmin. And in terms of real-life usage, that's definitely holding true as well. In fact, actually, I'd say that the processing and processor, however you want to describe it, is faster than that. So, for example, if I look at routing calculation times, it's generally taking like 20 to 30 seconds in the case of about a 50K route here in Amsterdam. But then some routes I did were a lot faster than that. So, for example, in California and in Spain, much faster from routing standpoint than I've had here in Amsterdam, primarily because of the route density here in Amsterdam. Also, trolley coming through. Ding ding. Welcome to my life. Don't worry, there's helicopters and planes too. On to one of the second differences between the 830 and the 530 is the full map set on this. Now, in the case of the 530, you cannot put in here like 123 Maple Street as a destination, whereas in the case of the Edge 830, you can. It has a full address database in addition to the full map set database. Both units have maps on it, both units have street names on it, but only one can be searchable from a street name standpoint, and that's the Edge 830. One of the differences between the 820 and the 830 is that this now has Garmin's Heatmap data in it. So that pulls from GarminConnect.com, and it has a essentially layer over the top of your base map set data that shows you where people are actually cycling. Now, you don't actually see it on the display itself. Instead, it's used for the underlying routing instructions. And that gets to the third difference between the Edge 830 and the Edge 530 is the point of interest database, POIs as it happens to be called. What that means is that you can search on the Edge 830 for a nearby restaurant or a monument or a gas station or a train station, whatever you want to search for, you can do that from a category standpoint. Whereas on the Edge 530, it doesn't have categories, and you can only see some of those. Like on the 530, I can see parking lots and train stations and ATMs and a few other random things around me here, but I can't see like all restaurants, only like 1 or 2 restaurants. So the Edge 530 database is a little bit incomplete, whereas the 830 here has tons of those things, and you can find what you want nearby and then just simply route to it. The next new feature on both the 530 and the 830 is the ClimbPro function. What this does is it automatically divides up any route that you have and finds the climbs within that route. So, you know, typical route may have a couple minor climbs leading up to a major climb if you're in the Alps, for example, or even in the case of down mountain biking in California, there was a couple minor climbs and some fairly substantial climbs that I had. So in that case, what it does, it divides up those climbs automatically on any route that you have, and then it goes and gives you, while you're climbing, your ascent left, ascent remaining, your distance remaining, so distance on the ground, as well as your average gradient remaining. So it would show you, for example, that you have 2.1 miles remaining, ascending another 700 feet or 1,000 meters, whatever it may be, and then it'll go ahead and show you the average gradient remaining. So it could be 5% or 7%, depending on what's left. I found this super useful in a climb I did down in Spain about a month or so ago in Sa Calobra, where you had a pretty substantial climb that, you know, you roughly knew what that was, but to be able to see the exact amount of gradient I had left, especially since it spikes up towards the top there, and to go ahead and also see, for example, how much distance I had left was super useful. So to know what that looks like is pretty handy. Again, trolley. Next, Garmin has added a bunch of new mountain biking features. Starting off with 3 new metrics. They're calling them mountain biking dynamics, but they're basically just 3 new metrics. Number 1 is jumps. So every time you go off a jump, you will get a notification on your Edge 830 showing you how far that jump was, so distance in usually in feet or meters, whatever you have your unit set to, and then you also have your hang time in the air. So how many seconds did you go in the air for? And then there's also grit and flow, and those are not anything to do with jumps, but the actual trails themselves. So grit is how difficult is the trail, and that means that if you have 2 riders doing the exact same trail, it should end up with the same grit score, and whereas flow is how well you executed that trail. So if you have 2 riders that are riding at different abilities doing the same trail, they should end up with very different flow scores. And later on Garmin Connect, as well as Garmin Connect Mobile, you can plot that. In fact, on Garmin Connect's website, you can overlay that directly onto a map set to look and see different color coding on the difficulty level. Next on the mountain bike front is new Trailforks integration. Now, a year ago when Garmin came out with the Edge 520 Plus, they announced a new Connect IQ app that you could load on your Edge and it'll help you to find different routes and whatnot. You can log into your account and save routes and all that kind of stuff. That's still here and that's still totally useful. But what they've done with the 530 and the 830 is actually baked in all of that Trailforks data right into the unit itself. So there's 130,000 plus trails that are now loaded on this unit from everywhere in the world, not just the region you bought it in. And what happens there is that as you're going down those trails, you can see that data directly on this. It also means that it can route onto that data as well. And then atop that, they have something called Forksight, which means that as you come up to a trailhead where 2 trails split, or you get just some options. You get options on the trail. It'll then go beep on your unit and show you what those options mean. So it could show you to the left is one trail name, to the right is another trail name. This one has one difficulty, this one has a different difficulty, this one's 5 miles, that one's 8 miles. All that's shown right here the second you slow down. It's pretty darn cool. Next, the Edge 830 has a new bike alarm built into it. Now, at first that sounds a little silly, like why would I just leave my bike with this on it and walk away? But it's not really for that. It's not like going into work for the day and leaving your bike outside and hoping it's still there. Instead, it's for the cafe scenario or a rest stop scenario where you've got your bike roughly within range of you, but maybe not like super duper close. You can put this on your handlebars and enable the bike alarm, and it has even a pin code to it and whatnot. And then if your bike is moved, it'll make this horrendous sound, just like right now. Once that sound has triggered, you'll also get a smartphone notification on your phone. So if you're within range of Bluetooth, which more than likely you would be if you could hear this, you'll get notification there as well, just in case it happens to be kind of noisy around you. The next feature falls in the same ballpark of not losing things forever, and it's called Find My Edge. The goal behind it being that if you lose your edge, for example, if you're mountain biking and it pops off and goes off into the brush somewhere and you may not notice it, the split second it does that, it actually tells your phone exactly where your edge device is, the exact GPS coordinates of it. It even shows up as a notification there, so if you happen to be wearing a smartwatch, you might even catch that in real time. And then from there, what you can do is the Garmin Connect mobile app will open up that exact location on the map, and you can get yourself back to that point and find your edge. So once you get back to that location and within Bluetooth smart range, you can trigger an alarm on this, which is like a little beeping sound. It's not quite the same as like the bike theft alarm. I actually think they should use that one instead, but it uses like just a standard beep alarm, and hopefully you'll be able to find it again. Next are the new altitude and heat acclimation features. Now, of course, if you've ever gone from a lowland location, like where I am right now in Amsterdam, up to the mountains, you know that you probably suffer a bit from the altitude, especially if you're going to something many thousands of meters up. So in the case of altitude, it actually shows you the exact meters that your body has acclimated to, and this is all based on kind of published science that they're just simply pulling out. And then on the heat side, it does the exact same thing, but it shows you the percentage of acclimation to a given heat level. And there's a bunch of tables and whatnot they've built into this, so it's not like just magic math or anything. And if nothing else, at the end of the day, it shows you a reason why you can tell your friends that you were slow, because my Garmin said I'm not acclimated. So there, booyah. But if that is the case, there's a new feature for you, which is a new training plan functionality. Now, Garmin announced training plan, or the training plan API, as part of the Garmin Connect Summit a couple weeks ago. But on this device itself, they've revamped how training plans and how structured workouts are executed. So they've redone some of the graphics. They've also added the ability to just simply add a course straight from the structured training workout provider. They've also added the ability to see what gear you should have. So their goal there was more about targeting cyclists that may be somewhat new to cycling and may not know what kind of gear they need on certain days from a weather standpoint. The next feature has been somewhat funny for me to test because it's shown me how bad I am at this one particular thing, which is nutrition and hydration. So Garmin has always had nutrition and hydration alerts, or they had them for a while anyways, in a number of different devices, but what these are now are smart alerts. It'll go ahead and determine how many calories and how much hydration you may need, and then as you're riding, it'll show you in real time. It'll pop up and say, hey, you need to be drinking this much, and at this point in your ride, you should have drank this many bottles already. Pretty cool. And the same goes for calories. It pops up a banana and says, hey, here's how many calories you should have consumed at this point in time. Now, at the end of the ride, and this is where my revelation came, is that it actually then has you record how much hydration and how much calories you intook during that ride. And what I found for all my rides is I've basically taken no calories whatsoever and hope for the best. And then on the hydration side, I bring all these bottles and then never actually drink much of any of them. Still, it's kind of cool stuff, and it makes sense, like these little tiny things over time, that if you keep getting reminded at the end of long rides that you're not doing anything, eventually you might change your ways. Speaking of long rides, both the Garmin Edge 830 and the 530 support the Garmin Edge battery pack, or the Garmin Charge, I think as it's called. What that is, it's a battery pack that's built into the bottom of the mount effectively. You can click the two together, and then it uses the charging ports in the bottom here, the waterproof ones, to go ahead and charge your Edge device. Pretty cool. It's something that came out with the Edge 1030, but no one really ever used, and a lot of stores even stopped stocking it altogether because no one bought it. But now there's a lot more units that have it. I think we might see more people actually start to use it. Next, a bit of a quick disappointment for some folks. The buttons on this unit are still on the front. There's no buttons on this side because it's the Edge 830. The 530 has buttons on the right-hand side as well as buttons on the left-hand side. With the Edge 830, there's only one button on the left-hand side and the two front buttons there. Some people don't like that because it's a bit tough to press those buttons against some mounts. For me, it's never really personally been a problem, but it again depends on the mount and your bike and stuff like that. So a bit of a bummer that that has not changed with the Edge 830. And while we're at it, the user interface has actually changed a little bit here. Not a ton. It's very similar to the Edge 1030, but there are some nuances to how you use menus and stuff like that that may take a little bit of time to get used to. Not like weeks or anything, but probably just a couple rides until you're used to this interface versus some of the previous ones. Next, the Edge 830 joins the Edge 1030 and virtually all of Garmin's devices in the last couple of years in supporting Bluetooth smart sensors. So if you do have some Bluetooth smart only sensors, they are supported here. These days though, almost everything is dual amp plus and Bluetooth smart, so it's not too much of an issue. It's more just Garmin getting on board with having Bluetooth smart sensor support like most of their products have for the last couple of years. Coming out of the last two items here is power performance curves. So this is something you've probably seen on training plan sites for like years, at least a decade or more, and it simply plots your power over given power durations. It could be called the power duration curve, I mean maximal curve. Different companies, different ways to call it things, and it's slightly nuanced depending on the different platforms, but at the end of the day, it's just plotting your time and power together. Okay, last but not least is the new battery life claims. In the case of the Edge 820, previously it was 15 hours of battery life claim with GPS on and sensors and whatnot. In the case of the Edge 30, they're bumping that up to 20 hours with up to 48 hours in battery saver mode. So in battery saver mode, you turn off a bunch of things and you get more battery life if you're trying to do like super long events. So honestly, I think if you're doing that long, just pony up for the battery pack. It'll make your life easier. And of course, the biggest thing is just to simply ensure that your backlight is not set to 100%, but don't worry, it reminds you of that. Just like the dinging reminds me of yet another trolley. Okay, there you go, a complete complete look at the Garmin Edge 830. In terms of my final thoughts on the unit after using it for more than a month now, it's a really strong unit. I personally actually prefer the Edge 530, somewhat because the buttons, I can do things quicker, somewhat because I think it's just a better value for the money at $299 versus this is a $399. But overall, like, it's been working well for me. I've had 2 bugs on this I did not have on the Edge 530. By the time you see this video, they'll be resolved and good to go. Anyways, if you found this interesting, go ahead and whack that like button at the bottom there or the subscribe button. I appreciate it. Have a good one.